Hello, how's everyone doing today? I hope everyone's doing well and you enjoyed Marge's talk about the subtle art of saying no. Also, this morning's talk with Sandra about social impact and incorporating social impact into adventures. This is going to be something similar along the same vein of social impact, and it's freelancing as a public interest, the social impact of independent work. Um, But while I get started, for those people who are already in the chat, my three viewers right now, if you could answer, how is your freelance venture supporting public interest and making a positive impact in the world and your community? In the chat, there are no wrong answers, and if you're still not sure, and if it's something that you figured out or you haven't thought about before, that is also a perfectly good answer. I would just love to see, what people have in mind right off the bat. So. Anyway, while we get on that, I will begin. Right. So let's talk about the outline of this presentation first of all. So we're going to establish some working definitions of what is a freelancer and distinguishing a freelancer versus employees. We're also going to be talking about what is the public interest. We're going to talk about the social impact of freelancers by looking at them as economic actors and economic units or economic building blocks. We're going to see about how freelancers bridge markets and communities and create new opportunities in their networks. And we're going to talk about a proverb called "For Want of a Nail" before we talk about actually measuring impact and cascading impact. So. Let's move on to the next slide. So what's a freelancer anyway? So a freelancer is someone who works on different projects with different companies instead of being a company employee. Where a lot of us are very familiar with this idea because a lot of us have already gone through like this internal discourse. It's like, what is a freelancer? What is it they want to do? Why do I want to be a freelancer? Right? It's usually, it's also commonly used for people who are self-employed, not committed to a particular employer long-term or employer long-term. The origin of the word, the earliest call of what is a freelancer, is by Sir Walter Scott in a romantic novel he wrote called Ivanhoe, which shows the earliest printed word of the origin of freelancer in the 1800s. And it was used to refer to mercenaries and hired hired soldiers, so fighters for hire, who would fight for kings in wars, or would fight for the highest bidder. So to this day, it still refers to people who work without a specific allegiance or work for themselves or being self-employed. So that's basically what a freelancer is, just a working definition. What is the public? I got these slides mixed up, but so what's the difference between a freelancer and an employee? Something else that I want us to get at to have very clear is that freelancers are independent, they're agile, so because they're very small and only really the only real business unit is them, they're very agile and they're very lean because they don't need a lot of superfluous structure to survive and thrive and perform their work, and usually have self-determined expectations as they decide for themselves. An employee is not as dependent. They're integrated into a bigger structure or system. They're anchored to that system or that employer or that institution. And they're also supported in many different ways that freelancers aren't by these institutions or their employers. And their expectations are also determined for them. But in the end, what they both have in common is that they are the most basic unit of society's human resources. There's nothing smaller for a society in terms of an economic something that can produce economic value, such as an employee or a freelancer. So that brings me back to what is the public interest? What does this have to do with the public interest? And as I mentioned, the employee and the freelancer are the smallest units of economic production. So they, by being part of communities and economies and markets, they're actually supporting the well-being and welfare, freelancers and employees, of their networks and the public interest that surrounds them. Public interest being anything that it really is of concern to the general public and really raises the quality of life and welfare of that public. So with those definitions out of the way, I would like to talk about how do freelancers specifically, unlike employees, or rather, how are freelancers best equipped as agents of social impact? So let's look at them as economic actors, right? So as building blocks or units in our markets that are producing value for other agents, they're lean, mean, and agile. And that basically allows them a very unique opportunity to connect and reach and create opportunities in places that other economic actors are unable to do through direct connections. Let's make a comparison. And if anyone could incorporate in the chat, your own views of why I put these images next to each other, right? But first we have, on the left we have a very big network of highways. We have really wide, open, stable roads that we know their structures are going to be there forever, and we also have a very really big truck that relies on these systems and can only really travel through these really long roads across these really, really big structured networks that don't really move or change. Whereas on the other hand, we have a map of a smaller neighborhood. It's, that's actually Coconut Grove, which is here, right here in Miami. It's one of the most beautiful areas it's basically old, old Miami per se. But so if you're around the city, I highly recommend you go there and just check out the area. But it's a much smaller neighborhood. It's not a whole country. It's a small neighborhood which has smaller roads and probably different terrain all over the place. We have a complex winding mountain road, and we have a cyclist. We have a cyclist who is much better equipped to travel through these roads than a big truck is. So the contrast that I'm trying to make here is that on the left side we have what are considered the more traditional businesses that are connected through really complex networks and dependencies, and we're operating at a really, really large scale with really, really solid and well-developed infrastructures, versus the small localized scale of an agile, lean and mean freelancer navigating a very localized economy that is mostly based on their direct connections to that area and to that economy. Through with a bicycle, which is basically a completely human-powered vehicle that can get around very difficult curves and very difficult corners that a truck would 100% be unable to get to. Each one has their own set of advantages, but the advantage, a freelancer is much more like the cyclist, who can make turns quickly, who can explore whatever they want and go on really complex terrain, whereas the truck is a very big business that is really, really tied to a specific path in a specific direction. So because of this agility and this ability to get into nooks and crannies of our economy in a way that other businesses don't, freelancers have a great potential to really bring markets and communities together in ways that they couldn't before. There are several. I actually got this idea. From a speaker at FreeCon last year. If I remember correctly, it was Pam Slim, and she was one of the people who were speaking on the first day of FreeCon last year. And she was talking about how you, as a freelancer, when you sign a contract with a client, you are not the star of the show. The client is the star of the show, and you join when a client onboards you, or you're on board and you're starting a relationship with a client. You are in fact joining the client's community as one of the servants of their mission. And if you look at this map in the way, if you take that idea into consideration and you look at this diagram that I put here at the bottom, you see, you could ask yourself, who is the freelancer and who is the client here, right? And there's no real distinction. It's really hard to make a clear distinction, because you can interpret either the freelancer being at the center of all these connections, or you can imagine the client being at the center of all these connections. But altogether they're a mix of different communities that, as they work with each other, and for example, as a freelancer that could be standing right in the very middle of all of those communities, you're basically bridging together two entire sectors that would have not connected. In your case, as a freelancer, you have your own network of fellow freelancers who also deliver work along the same lines you do. And then you have your clients community who probably has more clients who need similar services or a similar type of work to you. So that's how freelancers really bridge communities, in my view. So let's talk about, before we get into For Want of a Nail, I want to see some of the answers that the chat has for this question that I just posted at the beginning of the talk. So let's look at Kravis, and I hope I said that right. But he says, as a photographer, his contribution to the public interest is that he gets the opportunity to package stories of people, businesses, and etc., and display them to people who care. That's very important. You could, if a brand doesn't reach its relevant audience, or the audience that is most interested in it or would be most interested in through meaningful content, they have no way to thrive. They have no way to live. So a photographer does that as a service, not only to their clients, but to the public that sees this. We have Sam Slankard, who says, helping small businesses that can't afford to hire in-house or an agency with their marketing efforts. That's very true, which speaks directly to what I was just saying. Like they need someone to transport a big package across town, and they're not going to hire that big 18-wheeler to do that. And they can't afford to, and they don't need to. So they go to the little cycle, to the much smaller, much leaner cyclists who can probably do that same trip for much less. Let's go to Denise Antune. I get to incorporate my passion of ending human trafficking to the professional work I do. That's a big deal. That is a very, very big deal. And Denise, I would love to hear, if you are open to expanding on that on the chat, I would love to hear it, because I think that a lot of people, a lot of freelancers, especially because we work for, a lot of us do our ventures for profit, but it's because sometimes we focus so much on the business performance, we really, really forget how to contribute to big causes and very important causes like human trafficking. Like ending human trafficking. So thank you very much, Denise. And thank you, Kravis, for the comparison, for the compliments and the comparison. But anyway, let's keep moving. So let's talk about For Want of a Nail. It's an old proverb that describes how the work of a freelancer can tip the scales of change and have, I don't think I finished this slide, but let's read this quote. For the want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For the want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For the want of a horse, the rider was lost. For the want of a rider, the battle was lost. For the want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. And all of that for the want of a horseshoe nail. So, these are a couple slides that are not right, but let's think about that for a minute, and please post your impressions and your interpretations of that quote in the chat. But in the meantime, I'll give you mine, which is that it teaches us the potential of small actions can have in the public interest. Right? You as freelancers, in my case, for example, I'm a web developer and a freelance technologist. One of the most common problems that I run into with nonprofit clients is, hey, we have a lot of communications to push out, but the website keeps failing us, and the website is having some issues that are sometimes really difficult to get around and keeping us from really fulfilling those communications. So we need to find a process to make that happen, And I know that through my work, which it can be some simple CSS changes, or maybe it's simply giving them a usable workflow. I know that my work is helping them have their message heard by an audience of several thousand people every single day for a few of my clients. And it's a small thing that I'm doing for them. I'm just telling them, hey, this is how you use WordPress. But to them, it means communicating to an audience of 2,000 to 5,000 people every single day. So, and in that way, because as the For Want of a Nail proverb states, the freelancers can bring out unprecedented change to their networks simply because of the fact that they are much more agile and they're much more capable of providing personalized services that are focused on the impact of the client. So, for example, a nonprofit organization, and these are things that you can do you can actually measure, which I'll get into a little bit more in a second. Now. But yeah, let me see. Do we have any more comments? No, not at the moment. But if at any point you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'll be happy to address them during the talk. And I think we're gonna have enough time to do some questions, a little bit of Q&A if you're interested. But let me see what. VIP Desk Advantage. We're building online marketplace to connect digital creative freelancers with business owners and coaches on Collaborative Business Network. Collaboration wins over competition every single day, for sure. That's 100% true. And collaborations, competition, I think is a great way to drive each other to do more. But I think collaboration is really a great way is really how we build each other to do more instead of trying to compete against each other. So yeah, thank you very much for your work and for the comment. So anyway, let's talk about, let me have some more. Anyway, I have about 13 minutes left, 12 minutes left, so we got plenty of time. But measuring impact, let's talk about measuring impact. So cascading impact. The way that I want you to think about your impact is like a cascade. You can also think of it as a butterfly/ripple effect, but I see it more as a cascade because it's a lot more focused and organized. Whereas a butterfly effect, it's like all over the universe. But let's think about it this way: freelancers have their own mission and vision that drives their work. Everyone has a purpose. Denise gets to contribute. Part of her work includes ending human trafficking. Crevices is bringing awareness and making great content for brands that need to connect with their audiences. I am supporting nonprofits and fellow small businesses to really express themselves online, so the technology is not an impediment. Those are all very specific focuses that each one of us have. At the same time, our focus fits within the mission of our clients and the people that we serve with our services. And in the same nonprofit example that I gave, like I said, the cascade impact of me giving them the right workflow to publish new content or fix existing bugs or removing bits of the process that they no longer need are ways for my work to touch the lives of many people by supporting my client's mission. If my client's mission supports 1,000 to 2,000 to 5,000 people every single day, that means that my mission is also creating an impact in those people. My mission and my work is creating an impact in my client's audience. What I'm really trying to say here is that you can measure that impact by aligning your goals with the goals that you're supporting for your clients and with the goals that you're supporting for your clients and your community in general. And the reason, and going back again to the idea that when you join your client's community, your client is at the center, is the real hero of the story, is the one leading the charge, and you're joining their, you're joining their mission. You're joining with your skills, with your skill set and your vision to help them fulfill their own. And in the middle, in between you two, is that cascading impact. So you have your client, who is that king with the rod, and then there's you, the freelancer, supporting your client with their affairs through cascade, and which is causing a cascading impact across the entire kingdom, their mission, et cetera, however you want to see it. I'm very big on analogies, as you've noticed. But so how do we, what does measuring cascading impact actually do then? So let's assume that you have just this one client, and that client is either has multiple projects that lead into each other or has one project that is in different phases. And each piece of that puzzle, right, has a specific goal, and it has a specific goal, a specific expected impact, and they most likely have different metrics that you can track, for example, or certain metrics of success. So if you frame it in the way, for example, if you project one, and then if project one is, let's say, a landing page for a new product, then you can measure your success on that project by how many people were touched, by how much traffic went through that landing page, or how much engagement that landing page created. And let's say the project two from there is actually enabling people to buy that product online instead of just engagement is sales. And then you can actually measure your success in terms of sales. But what is the mission of your client with their specific product? Maybe they're selling some sort of, maybe they're selling something for back pain, and they have a product that really, really solves that back pain we're all feeling because of from sitting so long in the pandemic in front of Zoom. And that means that if you build a website for your client and your client is selling this back pain solution and 100 people bought that back pain solution, then that means that you help 100 people with their back pain. And the same thing can apply to all sorts of missions and all sorts of ideas. Oh, I gave my example before the slide, but it's the same concept, right? And you as a freelancer, you can keep treading along. You could do this with a single project. You can do this with a series of projects. Maybe you have multiple projects that you're working on. The impact is really based on what your vision is and what your values are, and what is the thing that you're looking to measure. Because these measurements, one, are examples of your contribution to the greater good, and they're examples of your contributions to the greater good in a way that is not necessarily for revenue or for business metrics, but really to say it's like, hey, this is what my work has done and how it has impacted my community and the community of my clients. So, closing statements. Let me get my breath. So, what we went through, we reached a working definition of what a freelancer is, and what freelancers can do. And we concluded that the freelancers and independent workers are lean, mean, and agile. And that basically allows them to align their values and their operations to support the mission of their clients and their communities. And throughout their networks and building these networks with every single new project and every single new connection, freelancers are building an ecosystem for themselves and an ecosystem in a context that they are currently serving. So therefore, every single thing they do, every single metric, every single metric of success and successful project that they have, it is all a contribution to the greater good, as long as your own impact is aligned with that greater mission or that greater good. A quote for freelancing as a public interest. Freelancing is a public interest because it enables people to create unprecedented value in unexpected, hard-to-reach crevices of our modern economy that traditional businesses and institutions simply cannot. And I made this meme. Because you have the knights of the round all hanging out with each other, all kind of putting their swords down on the table for a common cause. If you've seen this meme before, you probably think it's funny, but you have clients, you have managers, you have government, you have creatives, you have agencies, you have big corporations, nonprofits, consultants, small businesses, freelancers, all at the same table, surrounded around impact. At the end of the day, all of our work focuses on what impact are we trying to leave in the world, what impact are we trying to make for our clients. And what I have provided you today is a working framework that you can use to measure that impact and really showcase that impact with the rest of your community. Because it's really making a difference that making a difference and living well is something that we all have in common. Wanting to live well is something that we all have in common. And the way that we contribute to that living well for ourselves and for our communities is something of public interest. And freelancing is a very unique way to do it because it lets you take your own values and put it out into the economy in the form of projects and in the form of relationships that are going to last much longer than we could imagine. They're going to have impacts beyond anything we could really perceive immediately. So if there's any takeaway, this is the main takeaway I want from this conversation. But yeah, freelancing is a public interest. It might be geared around for-profit institutions. It might be geared for a lot of people might see it as just a way to make a living and a way to make money and kind of live life on their own terms. But I want us to think as well a lot on the bigger impacts that we're having, not only for the small business, but for the community where we're working and the different people that we interact with every day, and how we ourselves are an example of that, the possibility of change, not only change for better projects and better quality of services, but also as a better way to deliver work and create value in our economies. The independent workspace is growing, and it's growing every single day. And it's exploded ever since COVID because people have had to find their own ways to make money independently. And I want to open the floor to conversations of freelancing, not just as an alternative lifestyle, but also as something that can generate value for the greater public at scale. Um, so aside from technology, so my name is Livio Zanardo. There's my email at the bottom. It's also in the chat. Um, I thank you, Travis. If you have, if I do a lot of clinics for my fellow freelancers or people who are unsure of how to start freelancing or writing proposals, writing contracts, driving conversations, project management. I do all those sorts of things for my fellow freelancers. So if you are interested in that sort of consultation, that sort of help, you can send me an email at livio@doasromans.com. I also run a technology nonprofit for public interest technology, anything that has to do with nonprofit and public services, such as like filing out taxes, creating open data portals, and helping people have more transparency over democratic processes. Those are all things that nonprofit touches on. So I'd be happy to talk about that as well in another circumstance. But for now, this is what I leave you with, and I hope that you walk out today with a new way of thinking and a new way of seeing your work, and something I hope makes you more enthusiastic to keep sharing your work. So that is all. Thank you all for your time, and enjoy the rest of Freelance Business Week. Oh, and I forgot to say, follow FBW Miami on Instagram. I'm gonna post it in the chat. Anyway, thank you. Bye.